Well, hello, this is Peter Combs from BidAmount.com and P.O. Combs Asian Art in Gloucester, Massachusetts. And today is Friday, February 26, 2021, and this is our weekly video. We take a look each week at how things sold in the Asian art and Japanese, Chinese art community over on eBay, on CATAWIKI over in the EU, as well as what's happening at the larger auction houses and other auction houses around the world, mostly on things that we have found that we put on the global member pages, which is our subscription pages anyway. And this week there's been quite a bit added. One of the things I wanted to mention was that we've added the Bonhams sale that just came up for Asia Week, starting in just a few weeks down in New York City. They have some very nice things coming up, and if you're a Japanese buyer, this next series of sales in New York look particularly strong and particularly interesting. Especially for the Japanese buyer. The Chinese, there's some very good Chinese materials as well, as we discussed last week. There's a very rare Shang bronze and some other things. But the offerings this time around on the Chinese side are not as deep as they have been in the past. And I think that's partly a little bit of abundance of caution due to what's going on in the world with all the craziness with the flu and so forth. But anyway, there's still plenty of good things to look at. I wanted to get started first by letting you all know that over on the bookcase section this week, we did add the catalogues from Bonhams. Their Chinese and Paintings Works of Art catalog, which has some nice things on it, very buyable things, by the way, things that the average collectors can buy. You don't have to be the Aga Khan to make a purchase. They have a very good Japanese and Korean sale coming up that we're going to go over a little bit right now. And then there's the Indian, Himalayan, and Southeast Asian art catalog, which is bronzes, tonkas, and all that good stuff. Some very nice things in there. But I wanted to get started by pulling up first the Bonhams sale here. This is the I want to talk about the Japanese sale they've got coming, because there's some wonderful things in it, particularly this very nice big lacquer bronze. Interestingly, the Christie's also has a great big Heian period wood carving as well. It's almost, I think it's 5.5 feet tall. It's a corker. But anyway, this is also a Heian example, and it is lacquered, and it's beautiful, and we're going to get into it in a minute. All right, the first thing I wanted to talk about, though, was this Nakagawa Joeki the Ninth mixed metal brush pot that was made. It was dated 1883, and it was made for, they believe, probably for the Mitsui family. This is an absolutely incredible piece of Meiji period metalwork, pretty early in the Meiji period. As we've discussed before, what happened in the Meiji period, when the shogunates were ended and the wearing of swords and so forth was banned in Japan, the metalworkers who had made a very good living supporting the million-plus samurai living in Japan with fittings and metal accoutrements for their swords and for their outfits and uniforms and everything, because they were always adding on. They were basically out of business because they had ended the shogunate, and these metalworkers either had to go into a completely different line of work, or they had to find patronage or with something to make decorative metals. And the Emperor of Japan did a big push for it. They did massive bronzes and so forth that were sent abroad for World's Fair and exhibitions at that time, and so forth. But this particular family found work with the Mitsui family. And the Mitsuis, if you're not familiar with who they are basically, they were sort of the Medicis or the Rothschilds of Japan, for lack of a better description. Their fortune began in the 15th, 16th century. They were sake cookers, and from that they took their wealth and they expanded it out into opening lots of stores, department stores, manufacturing textiles, banking, money laundering, and money lending. There have been a few scandals with the Mitsui family over the years, as you have with any family that's that rich for that long. And they were going strong right through. Their industries are still, the remnants of them and fractions of them are still around today. They ended up owning, by the 19th century, I think they had something, or the early 20th century, I think they owned something like 150 companies in Japan, 150 businesses. It's a massive family, very influential. And they hired this fellow to make this brush pot for them, which is a spectacular mixed metal example, fully carved out, wonderfully worked, lots of gold, and so forth, all the way down. Just an absolutely elegant brush pot, absolutely superb. And as I said, it's signed and dated. And it's got an estimate of $12,000 to $18,000, which doesn't seem crazy to me given its history and who made it. Joeki the Ninth was one of the great metalsmiths of Japan during the Meiji period, during the Meiji Restoration. And it's signed and dated, and it's got some provenance. It's a great thing. And then moseying on over to this was this wonderful pair of two bronze bosatsu figures seated on elephants. And the one on the right is Manju, this figure here, and is carrying a scroll and a scepter. And then the other fellow is Fugen, and carrying a pearl, a gem for wisdom and so forth. And he was the embodiment of diligence and virtue. And then carrying these lotus stems here, and these beautifully patinated. One's an elephant and one's a food lion. And I hope you take the time to blow this up. The ability of the Meiji metalsmiths to do patination and to get the colors right on metals were unparalleled in Asia, almost anywhere in the world at this point. The colors were even, the castings were superb, and these are wonderful. They're not huge. These things are only, I think they're about 4.5 inches tall each. Absolutely beautiful quality, though. Absolutely splendid. And the estimate is not nutty on them. The estimate, I think, is pretty good. It is, what was it? It was, 1,800 to 2,500 pounds, or $2,500 to $3,500 for the pair. And they are absolutely splendid. Absolutely splendid. And then over here to this Edo period, 19th century, probably 1800 to 1820, 30, bronze bell. And the bell itself is about a foot tall, and it's on this stand, which brings it up to about 20 inches tall. But again, the metalwork, the patination on the bronze is absolutely stupendous how they did it. The coloration of it, the way they were able to pull the copper aspect out of the bronze and get this beautiful verdigris green and so forth. Absolutely wonderful. And this was something they were good at. They could induce any color they wanted in bronzes and give it a great ancient look. And here it is. And then you have these sort of root branch handles from which the bell is suspended and so forth. Absolutely beautiful, and estimated, I think, pretty reasonably, $5,000 to $7,000. But this is the centerpiece in a room if you're a Japanese collector, and it's a bell. It's a great thing. In my own family, my mother-in-law had a Chinese gong in her house. That's how she used to call the kids, and she'd bang that thing, and they'd come up from the beach or wherever they were and come home for dinner. But that's a nice thing. Hang it in your hallway and let people know when you're home. And then on to this, again, this Amida Nyorai lacquer bronze. It's about 40 inches tall, but beautiful quality, absolutely beautiful quality. And we're going to flip over to this one. I want to share this. I'm going to blow this up a little bit. Down here at the bottom, you just click those over on the bottom site, and you'll see the loading bar coming in, and eventually it'll fill in completely. And I wanted to share this because the facial expression of this figure, the slightly flattened out robes, the beautiful texture of the wood, the very, very fine lacquer work over it. It's very thin, so you get lots of details out of the wood. You can still see all the grain and the wood coming through, and then you have this beautiful draping of the robes carved in and so forth all the way down. It's an absolutely lovely example. Beautifully done, and standing, of course, on a lotus base, as it should be. All right, and there it is. You can see the toes are all there and everything. This is really a lovely thing. And as I said, it's about a little over 3 feet tall, which is a very nice side. Still has the stone in the head and another one up on top of the hair. And it's estimated at $100,000 to $150,000. But it is a 12th century statue. It is wood, and these Heian wooden figures don't come on the market very often. That's something I should point out. They often get sold. If they get sold or transferred of ownership, they're done privately in Japan very often. And in this particular set of sales this week, you have this one coming up, and you have another one that's being offered by Christie's. It's actually bigger, but it's unlacquered. It's raw wood, but it's got quite an appearance to it. And we'll see how they do. There has been renewed interest in Japanese art lately. There seems to be a new appreciation for it among Western collectors in particular, and I'm hopeful that the Japanese will begin to buy some of their art again as well, just because I think some of it should stay there, and they should have some of their heritage. And then on to this. This is two things that I just loved. They're estimated at these very nice Nogoro-style 17th, 18th century. These are Edo period lacquer discs, and they are 17 inches each in diameter. These are big. These are not like small, like coasters. These are great big things, like big chargers. And one with the this one has a sort of a oyster shell or scallop shell on it, with some sort of spiny crustacean coming out of it. And here's a conch hanging off of a piece of seaweed. But absolutely beautiful. And if you love this kind of stuff, I love the color of these. These hanging on a wall, 17 inches each, with a little space between them, would look absolutely wonderful. What caught my eye about them is, this is just an aside, many years ago, 15 years ago, we were redoing our house, and we were looking for an interesting color to paint the staircase. We have a 3-story house. It's an old house, and the staircase winds up through the house from the first floor to a landing, down around to the second floor landing, up the third floor, and so forth. And this is the color we picked for the staircase. And we found a custom paint company called Fine Paints of Europe in Vermont. There's a little ad for them. They make the best paint there is in the world. If you're redoing a room, it's a little expensive. I think it's about $75 or $100 a gallon or something, a euro gallon. But they'll match any color you have absolutely perfectly, and it's a European paint, and it lasts longer, holds up better. And this was one of the things we used as a guide for him. This in a Ming, in a 14th century Ming lacquer piece, sort of hybrid the two colors, blend them together. And that's the color of our staircase running up through the middle of our house. And I love the color, and I love these two plaques. All right, now let's see. Over here, we're going to get over to the Christie's. This is now the Christie sale of Japanese works of art and Korean. They have some really good Korean things. I want to point that out. But one of the things that's pretty amazing in this auction that Christie's is doing, they have two of these hokusais Under the Well of the Great Wave. These prints are often known just as the Great Wave. And it's, of course, one of the most famous Japanese woodblock prints that were ever done. And they have an abundance here. They have two of them. It's kind of showing off. And this wave, of course, Hokusai was heavily influenced at the time by European artists. He was one of the first block printers to really to work on the idea of perception of depth of field. And this one was, of course, the series that was done of the different views of Mount Fuji. And this is one looking through the wave as the oarsmen frantically try to get away from this clawing wave coming down upon them. It's a very famous, very powerful scene. And it's estimated at $120,000 to $180,000. And then here's another one estimated at $150,000 to $200,000. It's a slightly different strike, unbelievably well done, of course. And there's a great story that goes with it because of the interest of Hokusai with European artists. The idea of using line of sight, depth of field, really changed the way art was done over there, and it caused sort of a revolution in the art world in Japan. But this is an absolutely splendid print, very, very rare. And if you've got the money, you can sort of get a pair of them for your house. How about that? But we'll see how they do. I'm hopeful they do very well. And then there's also the Hokusai series of Pining for Love. And this was a very controversial set of books when it first came out. And they have numerous erotic or shunga scenes in them. And it's interesting because these books were sent to, I think it was to Paris for one of the exhibitions. And the Parisians were absolutely shocked by them because of their erotic nature. And they sort of misunderstood what the point of the artist was. But at any rate, to have the set come up for sale is very unusual. And the books are estimated at $50,000 to $60,000. This is the famous scene with the pearl diver being overtaken by the octopus, and so forth. And there's lots of, it's an erotic series of images with explanations and lovemaking and all that. And like I said, it was fairly controversial at the time when the Europeans first saw them, but today they're hot stuff collectibles. All right, and we'll see how that does. And then over on the Korean side, we saw a couple of months ago, we saw some Korean pots do very, very well. And and in one of the videos I commented, I was hoping that this would become maybe a thing. Maybe the Korean ceramics are coming back. And it seems that there's a bit of confidence coming into the Korean art market right now. And here you have this very nice 15th century Joseon period covered jar. It's about a foot tall, but beautifully glazed with an estimate of $250,000 to $300,000. And these are getting back sort of up in the prices that we saw Korean art hit in the 1990s. When Christie's had them, and Sebastian Hazard, who ran the Japanese department, now he's a private consultant and so forth, but he put together these spectacular Korean auctions. And this is a beautiful example. And one of the things that's interesting about these Joseon period and these Korean celadons in particular, they often have a more of a bluish tone to them than even their Chinese counterparts from the same periods. They were decidedly blue in tone, even though they did call them celadons. All right, and they've got this beautiful jar, and then they have this fabulous stoneware jar. This is even earlier. This is a Goryeo period, 12th century piece. And the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, right near here, has almost an identical vase to this. But this is a very, very lovely, very early example. And of course, at the same time, in China, in the Sung Dynasty, they were doing Qing baiwares, sort of the similar flavor, bluish tinge in the glaze. But the Korean pieces were even bluer. And this is technically still a celadon, despite the bluish appearance. And you'll see that the body is beautifully incised with this pattern with a lotus flower. It runs all the way around. This lotus flower appears between each of these lugs. I love how the glaze runs down off of the lugs on the handles. Here's another one. This is the other side of it, and again, there's the lotus petals, and they do photograph them wonderfully. If you really want to see what early Korean celadons look like, you can really pull this one in and get a good look at it. Because in Korea today, they are still making, to this day, some extremely well-done Goryeo and Joseon period celadons and vases and blue and white examples and so forth. You got to be very, very careful. Because some of them are really tricky. They've gotten awfully good at it. But this is a real one, beautifully potted, and it's got a good estimate on it. It's estimated at $100,000 to $200,000. And when you have 100% range and estimate, what they're saying is that we're not really sure where it's going to go, but we believe it's certainly worth 100. It may be worth 200,000, which means the reserve is probably just under that 100,000 mark. And I don't think that's a crazy number for this, because this is a rare one, and similars are in museums already. But when you see these big wide estimates, it's not like seeing 100 to 140,000 or 100 to 120,000. It's 100 to 200,000. So it's a big leap, but it shows also some confidence in the market, what's coming up. And then over here, this is that other Canon Basatsu that I was talking about from the Heian period. This is the big one. This one is 59, I think it's 59, isn't it? 59 and an 1/8 inch tall. This is a great big figure with a beautiful expression, beautifully carved. Notice the musculature, the sort of loose skin, but it's muscular on the body, and this beautifully done head. This is the very contemplative look with this high work up above, his beautiful big ears coming down. And again, this time you saw the robes and so forth sort of flattening out against the body all the way down. Nice grain to the wood, and it's in wonderful condition, of course. And it's estimated at $250,000 to $350,000. But again, these do not turn up on the market very often. Again, Heian wooden statues are very rare to come on the market, so I'm hoping it does extremely well, and I suspect there'll be a lot of Japanese collectors interested in these, the real old school classic Japanese collectors. So we'll see where it goes. I think this one has been in a private collection in Japan for about 30 or so years, from what I remember reading about it. And then on to this, something more contemporary, but there's some very good contemporary Japanese art in this catalog I want to point out as well. There's some very good Showa period artists, people who worked in the 1850s, 1950s rather, 1980s, and even 90s, okay? And this is a great piece by Kishizawa Taikyo. And it is a fabulous bronze, and it's inlaid with these rosettes. This is this man just passed on about 20 years ago or so. I'll look back at his date to be sure. But he did this spectacular type of inlaid silver into bronze, and then these gem-like, almost Renaissance-style appliques worked into them. Just absolutely beautiful. And these serpentine sort of lotus-tipped devices flowing all over it like floating clouds. Just absolutely beautiful. And again, you have that great ability that the Japanese metalworkers have to patinate their bronzes, just like this. They got this rich, deep cocoa color into this one. And when did he pass? He died in 1992. So this was probably made, I don't know when exactly it was made. They didn't really say, but probably between 1950 or 1960 and 1980 or so. Unless he made it very close to the end of his life, but regardless. But the great thing about this, and it's signed, the great thing, the estimate is very reasonable, $3,000 to $4,000 U.S. All right, if you love contemporary art and you like this looks old, but it also looks new. I like it very, very much. And I think contemporary Japanese artists are really coming on, just the way contemporary Chinese artists have come on. And this is just an elegant piece of work. Absolutely great. All right, and that's it. That's just sort of a quick preview of what's coming up. And now let's hop over and see how things did over on eBay last week in CATAWIKI, our friends over there. One of the things I wanted to mention was this. This was that nifty pottery figure, almost like a Satsuma, of the recumbent elephant with the lotus on its back with these beautiful lappets. Just a funky piece. It had the repair, if you remember, on the end of the trunk. And in the end, it did fine. It had a 500 to 550 euro estimate, and it brought 500 euros right on the nose. I was glad to see that. I liked that. That was a nice thing, interesting piece of pottery. And then over here on this, you had this very nice 18th century bronze. Had a couple of dents in it. Didn't bother me because the inlaid gems on it and the patina and that very nice stepped base, I liked it a great deal. They dated it as 18th century. Sort of, if you think about Qinglong bejeweled bronzes from that period, this is sort of in keeping with that. You often see the same sort of jewel work draped around elephants on Qinglong bronzes. And here you see it on a vase. Yeah, it's got some dents in it. That's okay. If you really bother you can always take them to a good metalsmith, and they can actually heat it a little bit and move those out for you if you want. And they can make it pretty much perfectly smooth. But this was a beautiful bronze, and I like the patination on it because it shows that it was polished a few times and they sort of gave up, because you still have these dark areas. They sort of did a half-baked polish job on it at some point in its life, which I don't think it doesn't bother me at all. And somebody picked it up, I think, pretty reasonably. The estimate was very reasonable, 200 to 250 euros. Somebody bought it for 290 euros, which is absolutely fine. And as I recall, it was around a foot tall or something like that. No, about 8 inches tall. Okay. Anyway, nice-looking bronze, regardless. Very nice looking. And then over on eBay, you had silks continue to do very well. You had this nice altar, a table hanging with 3 rondelles on it, late Qing dynasty. Did just fine. It brought $2,550. I didn't enlarge it, but sometimes eBay, and I'm sure some of you have noticed, sometimes you get to these images and they don't enlarge, and I don't know why. And then the next picture from the same seller will enlarge. I don't know what the randomness in that is. But this was a very nice piece of silk, and it brought a good price. It deserved it. And this was something kind of surprised me that didn't sell. The seller had it listed as 19th century. I think it was probably more likely very late Qing or early Republic, but a pair of these famille rose lanterns that were reticulated. And the seller, I think, sort of made a mistake on this. He had an opening bid of $799 on these, and it did have a little break in it. I think he got a little too excited about it. Because in the past we've seen these sell, and this gets back to what we've talked about many times about opening bids and estimates and reserves and all that stuff. Go very easy on eBay with opening bids if you can, because if they don't get a lot of attention right away and start getting bids right off the bat, the Cassini algorithm on eBay is going to push this thing down the food chain, and it's probably not going to do very well. And this had sort of a big opening bid for something with a break in the top. But in the past, in fairness too, though, we've seen single ones of these, just one of them in good shape, sell for $500 to $600 pretty easily, sometimes more. He had a $799 opening bid, and I think he scared people away. I think he was afraid he wouldn't get there. I think he probably would have gotten there and beyond had he started it a little lower. But these high opening bids really hurt you. They really hurt you when you're trying to sell on eBay. All right, and then over here to this, the rusticated coconut cup. I love this, and what I liked about it was a couple of things. One, I loved how they did the waves going across the bottom here. I hope some of you noticed that. This little wave pattern and this very nice high relief script carved into it all the way around, and this old beat up rim on the top. This thing has been loved and used. There's the interior with the rim taken off of it. Here's a picture of the bottom. Lots of carving detail. One side is all script, and the other side is this sort of shoreline scene with these beautifully done rocks and so forth. I think he could have done a little better job with the photography. And here you have pine trees coming up and these big palm plants. It's just a wonderful cup. There it is. That's a better shot. All right, good color. This is a good old one. It's either 18th or early 19th century, and I think someone got a very good buy on it. $405. That was not a bad buy. That was a very fine piece, and it was beautifully, the patina of the wood was very warm, very good. It was a lovely little wine cup. I liked it. I loved that kind of thing. And then over here to the Republican pair of bottle vases. These are clearly Republic period, but they were very, very nicely done. They were a matched pair as opposed to a mirror pair. Here they are on the bottom with the ever-present four-character Qing mark on the bottom, and they sort of got it fold around there. But at any rate, $1,380 for the two of them. A very, very nice and very thin porcelain, very, very fine. And to me, these are probably, late Republic or possibly even PROC, somewhere in there. They weren't terribly old, but very, very high quality. I liked them. And then the rank badges are continuing to do well. I think there are a lot of collectors out there, rank badges. There must be, because there are always bids when they come up for sale, and good ones always do well. This was a pretty good one. Had interesting coloration. They had this sort of great looking, this peacock in the middle, and this sort of bluish green against gold, and these nicely shaded little flowers and devices and fans and so forth all through it. And a couple of people must have liked this quite a bit. It ended up selling for $1,300. This was from a seller over in where is this? Oakesville, Connecticut, just down the road, about an hour and a half from here. All right, and then over here was another one of these, and this was from the same seller. This one didn't bring quite as much, but I don't think it was quite as interesting, but it was a perfectly good one. And it was all on a metal ground, and then it had floating precious objects and auspicious symbols all through it, bats and gourds and fans and all that good stuff. And it did pretty well. It brought $575, but not as good as the other one. Not as good as the other one. And then hopping over here to this. This was that nice Qing period dish. I mentioned it last week. I just like the simplicity of it. I love the crab in the middle and then being circled by the sharks. Had a old hairline in it. That was about it. A couple of little flea bites out of the glaze. But a very unusual, sort of an unusual subject matter for these. And I should point out that Rob Michaels has a sale coming up too, and we'll be talking about that. And he's got some nice, I believe, as I recall, he has some nice Somatsuki and Qing wares as well. But anyway, this was a nice looking little dish. I like that. And I think it went fine. $171. Nice late Ming piece. Beautifully done. Beautifully done. And hopping over to this was sort of a bargain for a person who's collecting. And this stuff can get expensive, especially these transitional Shunzi Kangxi pieces. This is a huge renewed interest in them. This one was broken, but it was nicely fixed, and the pattern on it was very good, and there wasn't a lot of wear to the red. Often these plates have a lot of wear to the red enamels. This one looked pretty good. The yellow still looked pretty good on it. It had a break on the back. Where is it? Right here, out of this section. There it is. Clearly, an old break, but what the heck? Somebody picked it up for $81. So if you weren't in a position to spend $600 or $800 for a dish this size, you can get one that's not quite perfect. For a little more than a dinner out for a couple of people at a mediocre restaurant these days, if you find one that's open. Actually, in Massachusetts, a lot of the restaurants are opening. We have a bunch of restaurants here in town that are open. We've been eating out, and God, it's nice. Get around people again. Anyway, and then over here to this Kangxi dish with the dragons on the cavetto running around the outside here, and these beautifully done enamels. This is a nicely framed piece. Very, very nice. I like the underglaze blue on it, and I like the way they sort of dropped the flaming pearl in at the top. Just very nicely done. Here's a picture of it from another angle just to get a better feeling of it. And again, the vase with the flowers coming out of it. And this one did pretty well. It ended up selling for $406. It was about 6 or 7 inches in diameter. This was from a seller over in France. Increasingly, we're seeing French sellers on here, which is interesting. They more and more and more of them. Alrighty. And then over here on this one, this was a mid-19th, late 19th century Famille Rose vase. At a glance, it looks very much like, almost like a Republic vase, early Republic, late Qing, early Republic. That was all my initial reaction when I looked at it. But this neck looked pretty good, and I liked that enameling up there. And then when you flip the pot over, this is what you get. You get an earlier Qing mark on it, but I like this. It's got a Chai Qing mark on it. It's not a Chai Qing vase. But that foot, that rounded, very polished foot from lots of table use, lots of cleaning, lots of use, and these sort of pockmarked bottom, slightly convex base on it. They did put an earlier mark on it, which wasn't unusual, as you all know. They do it all the time. Here's a side shot of the foot. That looks very good, and now you get a better look at the pinks. See the enamels here? And the straight up shot in these, you always have to look at all the pictures, because here's a little trick. Like if you look at the pink from here, it looks very light. It looks much lighter than it does from over here. This looks a little warmer, a little deeper, and that's what you want to see. It doesn't look flat and dead. At any rate, this vase did pretty well. At the end, it brought $1,322, had only 11 bids. And I have a feeling a lot of people were wondering about it, thinking that it was later than he said it was. I don't know if it was mid-19th century, but it certainly was mid to late 19th century. But a very nice mallet form and beautifully decorated. I think that was probably a pretty good buy for somebody. And, oh, how big was that? People always say I don't always mention the sizes of these things. 12 inches tall, about a foot tall. That's fine. That was a nice looking pot. And then another one of these Cantonese Ivory Breeze fans. This was a good one. Looked like it might have had a little, there was a thread break down at this end or something, because these are all supposed to be all connected like this all the way through. So that may be that little bit of silk here. We have a seller that sells on eBay all the time. They're fan dealers over in Europe or Spain. And they always restring their fans so beautifully when they put them up, so they're all ready to go, which is a good thing. But this is a very fine one, nicely carved all the way around, lots of detail, very, very fine work. This is the quality of work that you see on early Cantonese wedding baskets, those elaborate baskets that are all carved out. And you can't make a mistake. You have to throw the whole thing away. Anyway, this was beautifully done and sold for $692, sort of right in the mid-range of what they sell for. Sometimes we have seen better ones, and they'll even bring more than that. And then over to this, the silk work. This looks like a painting. And this is the thing that's a little bit, you always have to look at these. This one looks like a pen and ink drawing from a distance right away. It's actually not. All these figures are done in silk. There you go, and you can see the silk and the thread work and all this incredibly fine needlework right out to the tips of the willow branches, beautifully done, and you have the faces and so forth. Now, it had some discoloration in here and here and here, and I can tell you that with modern technology, a good silk conservationist can get most of those little iron and acid stains out of the silk. They can clean them up considerably. But this was a nice one. I love the face of the child looking down under the plants and the mother standing behind her and so forth. Nice 19th century or earlier work. It ended up selling for $2,910 as is. And I suspect at that price, somebody bought it, and they've got somebody who's going to clean that up. And this thing will glow when it's done, because they'll clean all of the other threads out too, and get the gunk and grime and the soot and smoke and whatever has gotten onto it over the last 150, 200 years, really clean it up. All right, and I love the pairing of wood ducks at the bottom on the lower left. They're very symbolic in China, because wood ducks, they mate for life. They're paired. They pair for life. All right, and then over to this, another silk work. This is that silver metallic thread that they did on silk that was so popular. We have a robe that's closing in a few days. It's the silver on blue that looks just like this. We had a gold one a couple of weeks ago. As a matter of fact, Christie's of Bonhams has one or two of these silver metallic silk robes also coming up. With $2,000 to $3,000 estimates, so they're buyable, because we had just seen one sell a couple of weeks ago, or a week or so ago, for about $3,000. So they're right at the range is pretty tight on these. Anyway, this was a lovely one. This beautiful table cover or seat cover, a lovely, lovely example, and it did pretty well. It brought $1,295. These don't bring as much as the robe, but they still did pretty well. And then over to this was this very nice, hold on, this Fukigawa vase. This is a big one. And what I really liked about it was it looks like it's cloisonné. The upper half of it looks like it's cloisonné, and it's not. That's all painted. That's all paint work on here. You have the ascending phoenix, and then you have this scrolling vine below area with plants. Here's another shot of it. This was a nice piece. This was a nice looking vase, and it was big. It was, I'm going to get the size right on this, 50 centimeters tall. So it was, you're getting up into the 19, 20 inch range. Big one. Sold for 1,600 euros, which is perfectly fine. It's signed, marked on the base, very pretty, and it's a bit of a trompe-l'oeil piece because it looks like cloisonné on the upper half, and it's not. So I like that. And then over here to this, the kendi. This was a very nice little Kengshi, a 1 Li period kendi, blue and white, beautifully decorated, nice soft colors. And I didn't see any damage. Often kendis have chips and breaks here on the spouts because these were used so much. And you have the reigning horse. You see the same pattern of the horse on 1 Li bottles and vases all the time. There it is. Nicely done. Nicely done. Ended up selling for 1,308 euros, or about $1,700, which is right in the range for these. Right in this middle of the range. So the price of those is remaining pretty good. And then over to a few things that are closing. This isn't everything. That's the wrong page. That's just a list. That silver metallic thread robe is closing. There's another one that's closing on Sunday. This is a seller up in Minnesota has this. I expect it'll end up again in the $2,000 to $3,000 range. Pretty standard. And if you missed that one, you can go over to Christie's and Bonhams and chase the one they have. Also, Super Shrink, the seller who used to be here in Massachusetts but is now down in North Carolina, is this very nice Qing classic export tea set, very much made on the Western style, or English style of silver of the day. Beautifully done. These nice, very elegant bamboo formed handles here on the caddy, and this beautiful pot with that very much, it's sort of an 18th century style spout on here, coming up strong and straight from the base like that. Nicely worked body with a crest, somebody put their initial on it, R. It's up to $810. Expect that to double or more, but beautiful example. And as always, you can always look up the silver maker in the silver book over on the reference section on the homepage at Bidamount. All right, and then also this is very nice, sort of a garden scene with an older figure and two young ladies. Bright, strong, attractive familial rose and animals. A very nice yellow. I like this. And neither the yellow or the familial rose, the rose colors are overpowering one another. They're very, very complementary, but nice, clear yellow enamel. I like it a lot. Very attractive. It's up to $280. Expected to go a bit more, probably $500 to $600 by the time it's done anyway. But handsome. And then over here, this is Mark Wahlberg, artsonsunlink.net in Pennsylvania. Has a nice little jade of a monkey right here. Beautiful example. And this one is closing in a couple of days. It closes Sunday. It's up to $107. And it's a late Qing example. It should get up there. That's a nice looking one. The carving on it looks pretty good. And then lastly, another silk. This is a Kisi panel. It's done with the pleats, which is very nice. I like the way they added different elements and so forth to it. But it looks to be in very good condition. I love how they put the Chinese carpet under it, which is quite unusual. There it is. And there's a dragon coming up out of the carpet and so forth. Lots of auspicious symbols in here. There it is. And again, you see that same border that you see on robes. And this is up to $305. Typically, these bring $1,500 to $2,500, somewhere in that range. So we'll see how it does at the end. I think it'll do pretty well. They say it's in very, very nice condition, and it's being sold by a seller out in Yellow Springs, Ohio. So let's see how that does, all right? And that's about it for the week. If you enjoy the videos, give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, subscribe to us. If you have something you want us to look at, come over to bidamount.com and submit it through the Identification Assistant Program. Or if you need help with an item, and you can do that over there, subscribe. We've had a rather spirited conversation this week on the forum regarding some reproductions of Sung pieces down in the fakes area at the bottom. You might get a kick out of going through that. That was sort of fun. Anyway, I think the kerfuffle is over for now. But if you don't use the forum, you should. Every once in a while, something like this happens. It's pretty hilarious. But anyway, have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. And we'll be doing some videos on the Christie's and Bonhams sale. We're going to figure out how we're going to do those. And as I said, Rob Michaels has a sale coming up over in Belgium in a not too distant future. Check that out. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.